Welcome back to And Both. Today's conversation is one that I've been wanting to have for a while, and I'm so glad to be having it with someone who brings a thoughtful, practical, and compassionate perspective. Angie Enger is back. She is a sex and self-intimacy coach, a parent, and someone who has a gift for helping people navigate conversations that aren't always easy, or probably ever easy. When Angie was last on the podcast, we talked about intimacy in relationships, especially in long-term partnerships, and how relationships change with parenting. And while we were wrapping that episode, I mentioned wanting to have her back to talk about intimacy from a parenting perspective. How do we begin talking with our kids about sex, consent, relationships, all of these big topics? So this is not just one big talk, but how do you have the ongoing conversations, the everyday stuff that built a foundation? So if you've ever wondered how early is too early or what to say when your kid asks a question you weren't expecting, we're talking about it today. We're also going to talk about values, communication, awkward moments, and how we can start these conversations without needing to have all the answers. If you've ever felt unsure, unprepared, or just not sure how to even begin, keep listening. We're all figuring it out, and I hope that this episode helps you feel a little more confident as you navigate these conversations with the people that you're raising. Here's Angie. Welcome to And Both, a podcast about what it really looks like to put yourself on the list while raising kids and doing all the other things life asks of you. I'm your host, Ashley Blackington, and on this show, you'll hear conversations with moms who are figuring it out in their own ways, plus a few solo episodes from me from time to time. It's not about having all the answers, it's about sharing stories, learning from each other, and knowing we don't have to choose between either or when we're living in the middle of and both. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the And Both podcast. I am back today. Well, I'm always here, but Angie Enger is back with us, and we are taking the next step in a conversation that we had before, or I think it's the first step that leads to the step that we talked about, but
Yes.
Yes. Welcome back. Let's start there.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back.
So when you were on last, we talked about intimacy and relationships and navigating those conversations, which was lovely. And if you have not listened to the episode, go back and listen to the episode because it's fabulous. And today we're talking about, I think I mentioned at the end of the episode, I can't remember if we were still recording or not, that I wanted to have you come back and talk about intimacy in terms of like, how do we introduce this topic with our kids and how do we have these conversations? So yeah,
Yep.
I would love to do that. But before we do, for anyone who missed the first episode and hasn't listened yet, can you tell people who you are and what you want them to know?
Yes. Hi, I'm Angie Enger. I am a sex and self-intimacy coach. I have a master's degree in counseling and a specialty sort of education in human sexuality. And my approach is really rooted in, like I mentioned, self-intimacy, which is basically the relationship we have with ourselves, something that we can forget about and put by the wayside when we're in long-term relationships, especially. And so I really work with individuals on a one-to-one basis, even if they're in relationships. Usually they are in relationships to really get back to ourselves. So as I've been working through this framework and sort of exploring my own mind, I'm also a parent. I have a 7-year-old daughter and also used to be a sex ed teacher at a teen clinic and fun things like that. And so it's really interesting to apply my own teachings to parenting and also then with my friends and how they're parenting. Like just talking, everyone's always coming to me and like, what's your book recommendation? How do I deal with this situation? So I've kind of become a lot more versed in that field, even though there are millions of amazing sex educators in the world. Please seek them out. I am not a certified sex educator. I am just a parent and a sex coach. I'm here doing my best.
Just filling in the blanks. I'm available and I am always happy to answer questions.
I am a human.
It.
Yes.
I am a human. We're all trying to human and we're all looking for the human who knows like one step ahead of us.
Yes, exactly. I'm happy to be that person.
So when we were talking about this before, we're talking about, I think a lot of what we talked about was in the context of relationships. And, you know, when you're in these long-term relationships and you have people that are coming together, that's lots of history and years of our own stuff. So when you have people, like when you have your friends that are like, oh, my kid has started to ask questions. What do I do? Where do you tell people to start?
Yeah. So the first thing I usually say is like, you've already started. So there are a million conversations that you've already had that you didn't even really put together that were related to this topic of human sexuality and intimacy and relationships. And also, you are no pressure, but you're modeling for them every day, all day, how all of those things work. I say that to say that, like, you're not starting from scratch. I think if you grew up really any time before now. So I'm a millennial, I'm an elder millennial. There's this idea that there's like one birds and the bees conversation, and like your parents kind of like get it out of the way and then you're done forever. And I just think we realize that that's not the case anymore. Maybe there's like a concrete moment in time where you talked about sexual intercourse, but you are having these conversations all the time. So for me, one of my big pieces of advice is talk to your partner or your co-parent or whoever is raising your kids with you, if you have a person, about what your values are around sexuality, relationships, love, intimacy, etc. So instead of jumping in and being like, don't have sex till you're married, or like just blurting out some rule, it's really important to kind of take a step back and soul search around, what do I actually think about these topics? Because it's probably not what you were taught by your parent or what you were taught by TV, MTV in the 90s or something like that. So
Oh, God.
first, take stock of, what are my values around these topics? And there's tons of resources out there. You guys know I love a show notes link fest. So there's a resource called talkmore.org. That's like my favorite. But there's also like sexual attitude scale, which is this like humongous study of sexual attitudes. My husband and I actually went through it last night. It was entertaining, at least, of like just random questions like, sex is always important in your life, like just random statements. And it's nice to be able to understand, like, how do I actually think about this? What do I actually feel about that? Because if you're not rooted in your values, you're going to get really caught up in like the terminology, the rules, the words that you're using. And your kid needs to be able to make their own choices and make their own decisions. And so if you're talking through the lens of values, I think that makes it a lot easier to do it. So first step, take stock of what your values are around sex, intimacy, relationships, etc.
Yeah, agreed wholeheartedly. I also think it's really interesting that when I've had this conversation with my oldest is now 12, and I remember when I know we're hitting like another layer of that conversation.
Uh-huh.
But I remember when she was like, I don't know, maybe 5, and I always sort of wrapped it up in the idea of like she has seen. She doesn't remember my next youngest because he's 10, but she has seen me be pregnant with 2 other
Uh-huh.
kids after him.
Uh-huh.
And so that sort of has naturally lended itself to that conversation around, where do babies come from and how are babies made and how do babies go from like in your belly to out of your belly, and oh my gosh, what is all of that? And the thing that I think very often that happens is that people get stuck in the mechanics of sex, and they
Uh-huh.
get stuck in the idea that like the sex talk is that. And that's why that talk takes like,
5
15
minutes.
minutes,
Yep.
5 minutes, whatever, it's
Yep.
not, it's like an equation almost,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like this plus this equals this, or this plus this equals this, but you miss so much of the picture and so much of the story. It's like focusing on a dot on a page versus reading the whole page.
Mm-hmm. And you probably will have a million conversations that are all related before you ever have that conversation. So,
Mhm.
we're talking with our child a lot about body parts and their names and how they work, and body safety and consent and relationships and friendships and boundaries, on and on and on and on, before you ever get to the point where you're saying like a penis goes in a vagina or whatever,
Yep.
or an egg goes into a petri dish. However you are explaining it, you're having so many important conversations before that moment.
hmm And there's so much emphasis on that part of it that you lose the forest for the trees in all of it.
Hmm.
Because when you talk about, when I remember when she went into kindergarten, we were talking about boundaries and like, what if, are friends with somebody who's not very nice, or,
Hmm.
someone is unkind to you, or somebody makes you feel unsafe and all of that. And, not necessarily being like, well, this is step one of
Yeah.
75 before we talk about the sex conversation.
Body
It's like, well,
safety. Yeah.
yeah, it's permission and consent and, what works for you and what doesn't work for you and all of that stuff. And none of it had anything to do with sex. But
Right.
all of it leads to different parts of our life. Not everything begins and ends with sex, but all of these pieces build upon each other. And I think that like, I love what you're saying about taking stock in that, because I think that sometimes we shut the conversation down due
Hmm.
to our own discomfort. And it's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, I don't want to think about it right now. So don't do that yet.
Yeah. Or because we're like, I don't know how to say this in 4-year-old terms.
Hmm.
And so I'll tell you when you're older. And I'll say this, like, you're going to say it wrong. You're going to get your words mixed up. I do it all the time when my daughter asks me a question and I'm like, how do I explain this in a way that's going to work for you? You're going to mess it up. It's okay. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to change your mind. You're going to be like, I actually take that back, or you're going to say something totally different. That is all okay, because it's all about showing them and teaching them critical thinking and self-awareness. And it's okay that you're going to mess it up and it's going to be really awkward. Another thing I'll say about that that's really important, that I also learn myself the hard way every day, is remember your own bias. So, for example, my daughter, we do a ton of like body safety and also body comfort conversations. So we are deconstruct diet culture, deconstruct fat phobia family. And so we're super, super, super affirming of body shapes and sizes. Food has no morality, etc. And so one day, my daughter, when I think she was 5, she said out of nowhere, Mommy, I don't want to be fat. And it was like this dagger to my heart of like, everything I've ever taught you is for nothing. And like, oh my God, like it's gotten to you, right? Like,
Reviews, notes. Where did I go
yeah,
wrong?
like
When
worrying
did I
about
take a
myself. I
left?
just like just a gut punch. And I stopped myself from flipping out. I mean, I flipped out in my head, but not at her. And remember, like, reaction in that moment is important. Stay calm. And I was like, what do you mean? And I just kept asking her to explain what she meant until we got to the point where I was like, oh, she does not mean that in the way that I interpreted it at all. She's saying something totally different than what I think she's saying. And that happens. I can't even remember what it was. It was like really something you couldn't have predicted is what she meant by that statement. And we talked through it all, all over again. But that's going to happen when it comes to sex and relationships and bodies and things too. They're going to come to you with their kid brain and their kid context and say something that you're going to interpret as like, oh shit, this is this huge question. And they probably mean something totally different. So before you jump to answer, really explore the idea with them, really explore the question with them, try and see where they're coming from, try and see what media they saw that made them ask this question sometimes, and then you can respond. Because I guarantee you, like, however you're interpreting a question is not how they're asking it
Mhm.
when they're
Yeah,
when they're in the younger ages.
that like 5 to 8, where you're like,
Yeah,
huh? Like,
yeah,
where they can like they can read and they see something written somewhere, and so it gets
yeah.
repeated back. My my son is 5 and he doesn't read yet. And there was a guy standing on the side of the road and he was smoking a cigarette. And my son, out of
Uh-huh,
nowhere, says,
uh-huh.
"Mom, that guy is smoking hot." And my 10 and
Yeah, that's
12-year-old were like,
funny.
"Dude, that doesn't mean what you think it means." And he was
No,
like, "No, but he's smoking."
and
And
it's
so it was like,
hot. Like I see the seam. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. I adore that.
it's a prime example though of like,
Mhm.
there were people in the car that were like, "What?" And there were people in the
Yeah.
car that were like, "Oh yeah, absolutely."
I love that. That's so funny.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And in that moment, you like, you could have been like, "Ugh, idiot," like, no, 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 don't say that. Like, no, it's just
Yeah.
funny. It's fine. Like, let it, you really have to kind of be aware of like your reactions and stay calm, and because you want them to trust you and talk to you. For me, like when I have assessed my own values, that's my end goal is like, I want to be a safe space and I want you to be able to say anything to me. That's my goal. So like when I respond to her questions or even other kids' you know, situations, I'm like, remember that your goal is for them to talk to you
Hmm.
and not shut down and not shut you out. And so respond accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. My fear in not like I don't know. It was all gauged. Like our conversations around sex and relationships and stuff like that were all started by the kids. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't like they asked one question and they got the whole encyclopedia. It was
Oh,
like
no.
they asked one question and then you answer that question. And then sometimes like one of my kids for a very long time would like ask one question, get the answer, and like that was it. And then a little
Uh-huh.
while later they circle back with like another one and another one, and it was all led by them.
Hmm.
Because if you sit down and sort of like download this whole thing, like, well, I've been working on this PowerPoint since I was,
Yeah.
pregnant
Yeah.
with you to live for this
Yeah.
moment, it's not going to
It's
happen.
very much like a building blocks situation. Like it's all like iterative information, and you have to really like I love that your kid is kind of taking it away and processing it and then thinking really critically about it and coming back because it's a lot of information. I mean, it's really a lot of information. It's wrapped up in your own feelings about yourself. So it's a lifelong journey. Like we are all still learning about sex, quite frankly,
Yeah.
and how we feel about it and what we think about it.
Yeah. And like your kids may be asking a mechanical question, or they may be asking an emotional question, or they may not know. And so you can say, is this the direction we want to go with this? Or is this the direction? Where does that
Mhm.
land? I think
Mhm.
as a parent, my fear was always my kids learning about sex from somebody else, because
100%. Yeah.
then there's no it's that idea of like imprinting on
Mhm.
somebody, right? It's like if they don't have any information and you are not the first source in,
Mhm.
it's always going to be that level of like, well, like so and so's big brother or so and so's
Right.
sister or so and so's parent told me this is that, and that's kind of like where the base gets layered, and I never wanted that
There's like a
undone.
bias. I can't remember what it's like primacy bias or one of those biases where it's like the first thing you hear, you're inclined to think is the most right. And I will say like there are a million ways to do this. There are a million ways to parent. There are a million ways to parent around sexuality and sex. And also, you don't want your kid learning this stuff from the internet.
Yes.
Before they learn about it from you, like or
Yes.
Roblox or their friend's older sibling or whatever. Like whatever it is really important that they get this information from you before they hear about it on the internet. And it happens real early. Like if you think about it, the earliest girl I know of getting their period was 8.
Me too.
Like a real person in real life, they were 8. So that's pretty soon for me. And I would say that's quote unquote early. But if you think about that, like the conversations that come with puberty and periods, there's a lot that has to happen or that could happen before you have that conversation. So start today, start now, start with the smallest thing. It's never too early. There's lots of ways to have these conversations that are developmentally appropriate, even for a little kid. But yeah, 8, like that's, and don't teach your girls earlier than your boys. Teach your boys too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that I think that the period conversation, that I mean all everything ties together, right? It's that like,
Mhm.
would you want to not know what the heck is going on with your own
Oh my
body?
God, so scary. And I knew girls like that growing up. You probably did too, where like they think they're done, they're freaking out because
Hmm.
we weren't as open about this kind of stuff. I would also say look at your kids' school handbook for the sex ed policy. Most of them, if not all of them, are state driven. So like I live in the state of New Jersey. And so like all of the schools have the same sex ed policy, but good to know when that's if slash when that will come up at your kid's school as well.
Yeah. My daughter's school, or the elementary school that she went to, it was, believe, maybe the third last week. Like it was around this time. We're recording this in
Mhm.
June. It was around this time in fifth grade
Yep.
that they separated the boys and the
The boys and the
girls.
girls. Yep.
And the boys went into the music room and they turned the lights down because they didn't want anyone to be embarrassed asking questions.
Oh.
And they put the girls in the gym with the lights on.
I also was in the gym with the lights on. I remember watching the video of the baby getting born in the gym with the lights on with the parents. And that was the 90s. Like, we should be doing it differently than we did in the 90s.
100%. And also, like, I mean, think about how many people were not represented in everything that you learned in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like,
A lot. Yeah.
Basically, it was everybody except
Yeah, pretty much
for
everybody. Yeah.
anyone that would stray away from whatever was the flavor of the day there is
Hmm.
up shit creek.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a really distinct memory now that you're bringing this up of, so fifth grade, just like that, in the gym, lights on, all the girls. And I remember a girl, I don't remember who it was, raising her hand and saying, "But I don't want to get a period. It sounds awful," right? Fair. And
Agree.
so there was like some mom volunteers that were there too, and they all started laughing. And they were like, "Ha ha ha, well, actually, if you didn't get a period, that'd be a bad thing, but like, sorry, you're out of luck." And I remember them laughing at that question. And like, yes, sure, it's funny. Like, no one like, yeah, it sucks. It's a bummer. But like, I think back on how much courage it took her to ask that question and to say that and to be like, this sounds fucking shitty. And then these moms are just like laughing at you in front of your whole grade. Like, man, like, that's a bummer. Also, like,
Yeah.
did you show the boys the video of the baby getting born out of the vagina? Because I don't think they did, and they should have.
Mm-hmm. They should also throw a C-section one in there too, because that's a whole.
Absolutely.
That's
Yes.
a lot.
That's a lot. That's a scary one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my daughter came home and she was like, they had to separate people because they didn't want people to be uncomfortable. And I was like, this is how it starts, right? It's
This
like
is how it
you
starts,
talk about
yeah.
your things over there and you talk about your things over there. And we don't ever learn about each other
Right.
in overt conversations.
Yeah.
So
Not to
what is
mention if
that?
you're like gender creative, gender fluid, non-binary, like then where do you go? And then
Right.
that gets into a whole other conversation. And yeah, I have a soapbox that I stand on where one of my daughter's favorite two books, they're great for kids her age. So I would say like 5, 6, 7. One of them is all about penises and one of them is all about vaginas and vulvas. And we bought both. We like automatically bought both. We do have both of those parts in this house. But also it was like, I don't want it to be a mystery what the other people have.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember telling people like when my friends asked me, I always recommend these books, and I'm like, make sure you buy both. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. Like, don't you want them to just not be mystified by the other parts? Like, buy both, please.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a book in our house. It's the pregnant body book. I wish I will put that in the show notes because it's awesome. It shows it, so it goes through like conception. It goes through like everything, right? So like,
oh, cool,
getting your period and the entire like 40-week. I can't think of the word.
gestation.
Growing another human. Gestation. Yes, gosh, thank you. It's June. I'm fried.
We did it.
We did it. Group think. Here we are.
Woo-hoo.
We're gonna get this. But it goes through that whole 40-week process, but it also talks about sex and it talks about puberty and it talks about it's the whole thing. And so I bought it when my oldest started asking questions. She was probably around 5. And I gave it to her. And it's like, it goes into detail, right? Like there's like microscopic photos and all of these pieces in there. And I said, like, this is a page that has some of this information on it. And I think she must have been 6 because she was reading a little bit. And I said, if you want to look at this, I'm happy to answer any questions. And if there's a page that you're not ready for, just skip it and go on to the next one. And, look at whatever you want. She's like, okay, that's great. And that's what worked, right? It's like a little bit of information. You can read about these things and these pieces. And she was like, oh my gosh, what? My son is 10 now, and he's doing a project in school they're picking this project for the end of the year, and he's doing a project on sexual reproduction.
Cool.
And,
wow.
And I was like,
you're like,
well, I'm like, how did you come to this? Like, it was like the Big Bang or like all of these things. And I'm like, wait, how did we land on sexual reproduction? He's like, I don't know, I think it's interesting because he has that book. Yeah, he has that book, and he's talking about like, how like people like carry traits and what that all looks like and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Like, This feels very 2025, this moment.
Yeah, no, this is modern times for sure.
Today's episode is brought to you by Dovetail, the app that's changing the way families navigate caregiving. If you're juggling your kids' schedules, checking in on your parents, and trying to manage your own needs, Dovetail is made for you. I built Dovetail as a clinician and caregiver who saw firsthand how overwhelming this role can be and how much lighter it feels when the care is shared. Download Dovetail now on iOS, Google Play, coming soon.
So here's a question that I get asked, and I'm curious for your perspective too. So one of the sort of hesitations that comes up when parents are thinking about teaching their kids all this stuff is like, well, what if their friends don't know about it? And what if they say stuff at school that they shouldn't be saying? And I don't want my kid bursting into kindergarten and being like, I have a vagina, and et cetera, et cetera. So like there's this concern about our kids, I guess, for lack of a better term, like being quote unquote inappropriate or like not being responsible enough to have this information.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, as someone who also taught their kids about this kind of stuff, earlier in their elementary school days, like how you approached it. Because I certainly have a perspective too, but I'm curious how that went for you.
Yeah. I will say that we started with like body parts have always been called what body parts are in our family.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And my kids ran into this in school, and there was an incident with one of my kids. They were not involved, but they were a witness to something happening and helped this kid go to the principal to talk about what had happened. And when they used the word vulva, the principal was like, we don't use that word. We use private parts. And they were like, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like,
Dummy.
I don't I'm not going to call it a private part because that's not what it is. It's a vulva.
Right.
So that led to like a really interesting conversation with them about like, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And my response is like, no one's going to tell you that an elbow is inappropriate or a kneecap is inappropriate.
Right.
So like, as long as you are using the correct terminology. And I think that when you start early and you have these conversations, and it's a lot of it is a fact is a fact is a fact, that you're not sensationalizing things, and you're not, you're not like giving your kid some like secret, answer to the test, and they're going in being like, like, it is what it is. We're all gonna get there eventually. And so I'm kind of the like, not my circus, not my monkeys. Like, I'm like, if you go and you say this and your friends are like, we don't talk about that in my family. I said, tell your friends. If you don't want to talk about it, but you have questions, you can ask my mom because she'll talk to anyone about it. Because it's like, I think that is that's a really inappropriate use of the, like, we don't do that here. That keeps everybody in the 90s, like fluorescent lights in the gym.
Well, like keeps you like oppressed in a way, right? Like it keeps you scared or small or without the information you need to keep yourself safe. Right? Like safety for me is obviously number one for, I think, any parent for your kid. And the fact is, and the research would show that like this information helps keep our kids safe.
Yeah.
From predators, from uncomfortable situations, from assault, et cetera, whatever. And so I agree with you. I mean, there's always going to be, we can't control what our kids do and we can't control what other kids do at the end of the day. And so if my kid is at school using the word vulva, okay, well, like, I guess I'm not too, like, better than my kid being the one at school talking about something damaging or dangerous. Like, I guess that's okay. I mean, I think that we do in our house, we talk about home words. So like we swear at home, which horrifies my mother, even though she taught me how to swear. And we just call them home words because we're like, at the same time, like, we don't want to make other people uncomfortable, even though, like, I could get into an argument about how, like, it's not my job, blah, blah, blah. But, like, there's a difficult feminist argument about, like, whether or not we should be conscious of making other people uncomfortable. But, like, we will be, like, good community members in that we will be aware of how our words and our actions impact other people. And we don't want to, like, put people in a situation where they don't feel safe. And so, like, we say that, like, we always tell our daughter, everyone learns different things. Every family has different rules. Every family has different conversations. everyone learns different things. So there might be people at school who don't know the word vulva. And there might be people at school who don't like talk about this stuff. And that's okay. But like sometimes it's better for these to be home words. And so like we try and balance it in a way where the main point is that she knows that like not everyone has the same perspective or information or opinion so that she can kind of like adapt as
Hmm.
needed to that. Because I always say too, like, I think it's really helpful for your kids to understand privacy and understand body safety first, because that can alleviate some of the risk of quote unquote risk of having this information. So, like, one of the things that's come up recently, just in the age that our kids are, is like kids showing each other their various private parts, to use that term again. And it's a really interesting conversation of like, where's the line? What do we do? What do we tell them about it? And for me, my perspective is that is a body safety issue for the kid who is doing the showing. Like, on the one hand, like, no, I don't want, like, that's inappropriate for my kid. And like, you shouldn't be, like, she didn't give her consent to see that part of your body. But also, like, we don't want our kids showing anyone parts of their body at the public park, right? That's
Yeah.
a huge safety concern. So that one is a fun little tricky one too. They're all fun little tricky ones. But that's the thing is like, you're going to fuck it up. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to do it wrong sometimes. You're going to do it right sometimes. And that's how everything is in life. And
Yeah.
that's how every parenting thing is too, is like, stay flexible, stay honest with yourself and with other people and your kids. Like, and the research and perspectives and norms are always changing, which is super fun too.
Navigating it all. I think it's really
Hmm.
interesting how even if you don't necessarily have these conversations with your kids, at the same time, right? Like not everyone decides
Hmm.
that like when your kid turns 5, we're going to talk about this.
Right.
Is that kids pick up stuff from other people and they bring it home. And I remember my oldest was like, we were talking about this was during like a princess phase, and it was like,
Hmm.
you like meet the prince and you get married and you have babies and blah blah blah. And I was like, she had tied getting married first and then having babies. Like that was the
Sure.
progression of how things go. And I was like, it's you see the Disney movies and all. Well, no one has a baby because I want version 2 of every single Disney movie with a
Yeah.
princess comes out. Like have a kid and then let's make the real
Postpartum
thing.
depression in The Princess. Let's go.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what I
let's
want to
do it.
see. Yeah. Ariel's postpartum depression.
She is over it.
She's
Feet, no
over it.
feet, doesn't matter.
No.
But she said something to me, and it was like, and then we had been talking about sex, and we had been talking about all of those pieces, and she was like, when you get married and then have sex or something like that, like she had put all of
Hmm.
this together, and I was like, no, honey, that's not what you need to learn about this whole
Hmm.
thing. And she was like,
Hmm.
well, what do you mean? I was like, if you're gonna wait to have sex until you're married, like that is you're not getting that from me for sure.
Hmm. Oh, and they're absorbing it all around all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's why the values conversation is so important.
Yeah, and I said, like, I had sex before I got married, and she was like, "You did?" And I was like, "Yeah, with him." Like,
Yeah.
my husband who's standing
Yeah.
in the kitchen, he's like, "I am a bystander in this conversation. I had no idea. I just walked in here to, like, get a
Yeah.
drink. I was unprepared for what is happening."
Yeah.
And then that,
Yeah.
like, that by far has been the funniest realization for my kids in the like, when you talk about sex and you talk about intimacy, and then
Mhm.
they're like, "Interesting." And then one day they connect. They're like, You?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yes, that's how
More
you
than
got
just the
here."
number of times of kids we have. Like, oh my God. You bring up a good point though, which is like the partner role, or like the sort of, so we are both married to men. And so
Mhm,
I think that there's sort of an assumption or a cultural norm or whatever that like this is mom's area. Like moms are, and I think part of that is honestly from a place of necessity, right? Like as women, it is important for us to have this information and understand body safety and teach our kids body safety to be safe. Like we
mhm.
understand the threat and maybe have been through experiences where like not having this information or putting ourselves in bad situations, not putting ourselves in bad situations. It's not our fault, but you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think that it can kind of like fall on mom a little bit, but whether or not your partner is involved in that conversation also speaks volumes, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, look, I'm a sex coach, so my
There's
cisgender
no way around it.
heterosexual male husband is involved, and he is, but he had to learn from me still. He, I think, was inherently a lot more uncomfortable with the conversations and the body parts and the all the things. How have you guys approached that? Or like, do you have thoughts on sort of like balancing the partner role? Like, do you have a primary person and a secondary person, or how do you guys do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've fielded a lot of questions just by contract time, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily because I'm the go-to resource on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think like there's interesting things. Like sometimes my son will ask me questions, and I'm like, I can tell you about that, but we're moving to a point like with any of the mechanical questions I can answer, right? Any of the physiological questions I can answer, no problem, and I'll talk to both. And I think that's important too. Like for them to seek that out and be able to get it from, for my son to talk to a woman about this and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to there's like the emotional intimacy part, I can give my perspective, but then sometimes I will say like, I do want you to also go talk to your dad about this
Mm-hmm.
because it's not that if that's the way it goes, like if everything rolls down to me, then that cuts off an opportunity for another perspective of somebody that like I trust and that I
Mm-hmm.
trust to, we're on the same page with all of this stuff
Mm-hmm.
for them to hear it in a different way and maybe they'd ask questions. And so my son will ask my husband questions and then he'll say like he comes back to me and he's like, "So mom, I asked dad about this." And I'm like, "Oh,
He's like
okay."
reporting back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, "What'd you say?" And like sometimes he'll like say something, I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
Like I get it. And I do think like, we've been together for 25 years at this point. So
Wow.
like we've
Mm-hmm.
had every conversation around this and we've gone through the good, bad and the ugly about it. So that I always am thinking that that's like a
Mm-hmm.
really unintended benefit of
Mm-hmm.
being in a long-term situation. But I do think like if you are not someone who is partnered, if you are someone who is not represented, that it's really hard for people to find someone to talk to. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I know right now, my kids don't identify. I don't know how my kids identify,
Mm-hmm.
like in a
They may not
concrete
know
kind of
either.
way. They have lots of
Yeah.
questions. Yeah, they have lots of
Mm-hmm.
questions. And so I do think about this in terms of like how would I how what resources would I find or who do I trust to have these conversations with my
Mm-hmm.
kids if I'm not the person to do that?
Right.
And I think that's a really important step in the conversation is that it can't always be just me or it can't always be just him. I don't want it to be their friends as like option number 3. So where
Mm-hmm.
can they find resources?
Yeah, I do think that like there is a question, like it takes a village. All this stuff takes a village. And there's a question of like, who are your other trusted adults in your life? So one of the books, I think it's probably the vulva, all about vulvas, vaginas book. At the very end, it talks about like no one is allowed to touch. It's written in a better way than I just said it, but like no one's allowed to touch you. So like if you're ever uncomfortable, tell a parent or an adult that you trust. And at the end of that page, we always talk about who are the people that my daughter would talk to, because also in the event where it was someone that maybe I didn't feel super great about, not that we don't keep people like that in our lives, but you never know. Like if she was like
Mhm.
the neighbor down the street, I'd be like, maybe not, right? So like we have an agreement, her and I, and my husband obviously too, of like who are the other trusted adults that you can go to for anything. And it's like my best friend who lives up the street. And you can FaceTime Auntie Chrissy and Auntie Nikki, right? Like we have aligned on who the other trusted adults are so that we all know who those people are. And I expect that like when we get later into, older years, like those people are going to become even more important than I am, because there is that transition in the sort of middle school years where your kid's primary attachment figure changes from you to their peers. And so
Mhm.
like aligning on like who are those people that we know we all trust, I think is really is really important. And I remember my mom being one of those people for like my friends. Like I have vivid memories of like, oh my God, my mother. So I'm a triplet. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that here. I have two
Oh my God,
sisters.
cool.
Yes. So I have two sisters. I am a triplet. And God bless Grace. She is the greatest person. And I have this really vivid memory of being in middle school. We were at the bowling alley and there was a condom dispenser in the boys' bathroom. And of course, what happens? The boys all get the condoms and they start throwing them at each other. Obviously, what else would you do? And so when my mom came in the minivan and picked up a bunch of the girls and saw this happening, she was like, "Do you guys know what those are?" And we were like, "Oh, yeah, mom, like they're condoms." She was like, "Do you know how they work?" And we were like, "Whatever." Like I'm sure she didn't even answer her. And so she brought home this like van load of like probably 12-year-old girls and showed us how to put on a condom on a cucumber. And I remember that so vividly in my mind. And also the fact that like she was that mom to other people. Like when our
Mhm.
friends like took the wrong drugs and were like not doing okay, they would come to our house. And my mom was super responsible about it, right? She'd be like, "I have to call your parent, blah, blah, blah." But like, I want to be that mom for my kids' friends too, right? And I think
Mhm.
you do too. And so it's just interesting to think about like how our sort of network of influence can be really powerful and you can kind of like wield that power for good. And so yeah, it's not just going to be us one day, but
I
it's
know.
interesting. I also recently was like, "Did you get a lot of phone calls after that?" And she was like, "Oh, there were some really pissed off people." And I was like, "I want to know." I was like, "Whose mom was mad at you?" And she's like, "I'm not telling you." I was like, "I have to know." She wouldn't tell me. Bummer.
I think I love that because there has to be one. And I do think that if anyone that is listening is like, "Oh my gosh, it's been like this whole episode, I feel really uncomfortable, but I also have this like, staring at the
Hmm.
accident as I drive slowly by kind of feeling," is that
Yeah,
if you are the person who knows for yourself, like this is I have like
I
a
I don't want to do that.
total
It's not for me.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, like no, I would like to opt out. Thank you very much. Like the poor girl in the
Yep.
gym, like thank you. No, that
Yes.
to identify those people and to have that conversation because like it's going to happen, and if it's
Yep.
not something that you're comfortable with,
Yep.
then you have to find that person. Like I have a background in healthcare, and my husband he works with animals, and so it's like we're not like we don't work in offices, and
Yeah.
it's a natural part of like our life and conversation and experiences and stuff like that. But if we didn't, it was like, who could I reach out to? Who could I be like,
Hmm.
"Oh my God, my kid is starting to ask about this and I'm not really sure." And I think that's a really important step that parents can do because it's really easy to say, "I just don't want to talk about it," or like, "Don't have sex until you're married," or, whatever. And like when my daughter said that, I was like, how do you know that it's going to be sex that you want to have? And my,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
my poor
You're like,
husband, who's like trying to
really
get a
write this
drink,
down.
is
Yeah.
like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
Like, no
Yeah.
one no one buys a car without taking for a test drive. And she's like,
Yeah.
"What? Huh?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
Huh?
"All right, I guess we're
Yeah.
gonna talk about that today." But you have to know, like, you have to find your resources, and it
Yeah.
can be a resource for something small, or it can be like when I'm talking about resources, like if you have someone that is on a different path, or on a
Hmm.
different identifies differently, you are not going to be the person that lived that experience to be able to say, "Okay, here's the best information that I have available." You can learn about it, but having someone have the opportunity to connect with someone that is more in alignment with how they identify and their wishes, desires, beliefs, all of that stuff, that's gonna be such a value add for your kid.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that like it's like you said, it's okay to not be the one, right? Like
Yeah.
it's okay to be like, I don't think this is my strength. But I would also encourage a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of courage on just like when as moms, for example, we bring up our own sex lives with our friends, there's this assumption that like I have plenty of people in my life who are like, I've never talked to my friends about sex. I don't own a vibrator. Like, I don't know if my friends even have sex with their partners. And all it takes is like the tiniest cracked open door people want to have these conversations. So like if you
Mhm.
are a parent who has close other parent friends and maybe like you've never broached this topic before, like I guarantee you the other parents are also confused, a little lost, not sure. And, I think at this time, like we kind of have to talk about a lot of stuff. It's like, oh, so and so found porn on the computer and while they were at our house, right? Like we are a little more disclosey, I think. But like I bet you that your parent friends are thinking about this and also feel kind of lost and would love to talk about it. Just
Yeah.
just try and bring it up because people do. It takes a village, man. It really,
Mhm.
really, really does in like every way.
And you also like, I mean, I have 4 kids. My youngest is 5, and I've never heard of those 2 books that you mentioned, and I'm gonna go buy
Yeah,
them
yeah,
afterwards.
please. I'll send you an
To
affiliate
do
link.
perfect. Do that.
Yes.
But I that's what I think is important is like, even if it's not necessarily like me and my own relationship, other parents talking about how they're talking about this with their kids. Like I
Mhm.
have friends who are like, "Oh no, I'm not there yet." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"But your kid is
Mhm.
not 5." And
Mhm.
that's really scary because the longer you put it off, the more likely it is that you are
Well, they're
not going
not
to be the
waiting for
first
you.
person. Yeah. Curiosity waits for no one.
Yeah, your kid isn't waiting to be exposed to some other kid's Roblox. Please don't let your kids go on Roblox. Sorry. There's so much research out there right now about how damaging Roblox is and how fucked up it
Really?
is and how the kid safety settings like don't actually protect kids
Ugh,
from seeing really fucked up shit. We can talk about that later. But side note, but
it's wild.
yeah, your kid isn't waiting for you.
Mhm.
So either you can get in front of it or you can do maybe a little damage control after, which will
Mhm.
be trickier. Still important. Still important, still good, but
Yeah.
they're not waiting.
I also think it's a really interesting opportunity if you are somebody who is not comfortable with it, that when you have that conversation with your kids, that gives you an opportunity to talk about why you're not comfortable. Like,
Absolutely.
I am doesn't bother me. I'll talk about whatever, whoever. I mean, talked about like hip replacements. One of the things that we talk about is in occupational therapy, there's all these different categories for things. So there's activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily
Mm-hmm.
living and leisure and all of these different categories. So activities of daily living include things like feeding, dressing, grooming, bathing. Sex is an activity of daily living considered on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was in grad school and we're talking about this, I was like, that's an interesting assumption that this is something that's happening daily. It's like, my
Yeah,
God, what
baller.
what are we doing here?
Hell yeah,
Um,
let's go. Yeah.
but then, so I was like, interesting facts about this, right? So then I go and I work with older adults. I work with people primarily in their like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and people that have a hip replacement. And they're
Mm-hmm.
asking me because I'm the person who's in there helping them when they're getting like washed up and dressed. And like there's no more way and there's no more better surrounding to rip the Band-Aid off than someone you don't know who's like 30 years younger than you. And
Dressing
you're
you.
like in there post-op, like getting your butt scrubbed. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, so how am I ever supposed to have sex again? Because I just got my hip replaced. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, funny you should ask, Doris, because I have resources available for that. So like I've had like the most fascinating conversations with people about. I'm like,
I
these are
bet.
adaptive strategies that,
Yeah. Yeah. Can I make a note about that actually?
yeah.
I was just going to say there's this book called Magnificent Sex. I think I mentioned it last time. It's a phenomenological study. And one of the things that they learn in this study is that people who have had surgeries or life altering disabilities or life altering physical situations report that once they figured out, okay, wait. Basically, it breaks your brain open in terms of like how to have sex. And so they found that people were having really, really great sex because they had kind of just rejected all of their preconceived notions about like what they were supposed to do or how they were supposed to do it or the right position or whatever. And they were like, well, I guess we have to just start from scratch and like try everything. And those like sort of life altering changes encouraged them to just like break the mold. And they started having really great sex after, like
It's
better than
kind of
they'd ever
awesome. I
had.
mean, terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible
Yeah,
intro
like
into
stuff.
that change.
Yeah. But
But
like,
like
sex
really,
can be great. Yeah, sex can still be great. But no, back to what back to what we were saying. I think it's like that also goes back to like it's not necessarily the content knowledge that you are teaching your kid, like the right words and the right phrases and the mechanics. It's like the attitude that you're using and the
Mhm.
way that you're modeling the conversation and the way that you're modeling your own vulnerability that is so powerful for our kids to engage with and see. Because I'm not an expert, you're not an expert. Like I couldn't explain to you the mechanics of sex in detail or like use all the right words when talking about any of this, but I can model for you curiosity, respect, integrity, openness, vulnerability, all those things, and like that is the most core I think of the whole conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's really in those questions and in those conversations, I really do think that's what kids are asking for. Whether
Mhm.
they know that they are or not, it's like, I kind of think about it like your kids don't have like an emotional conversation around brushing their teeth. They cannot want to brush their teeth, but the
Sure.
actual act of brushing your teeth is a 2-minute thing, right?
Mhm.
All of the context around brushing your teeth is how do I take care of myself? How do I make
Mhm.
sure that like, I take care of my mouth and that I go to the dentist and that I maintain yada da da da. You're just
Mhm.
taking that lens and you're putting it onto another area.
Mhm. Yeah. I totally agree. It's never too late. That's what we're saying.
Yeah,
It's
never
never
too
too
late.
late. It's never too early. You're
Mhm.
going to mess it up. That's okay.
Yeah. And let the kids lead.
It can be, I also think it can be surprisingly emotional for the adults, right? Like your kid might come to you with a question you've never considered before, and
Mhm.
your reaction might surprise you, or your partner's reaction might surprise you. And so, like, be open to that. Be open to the fact that, like, you're going to be learning more about yourself too, and really doing some soul searching too, and like your values or whatever, in these conversations. Because you might be
Mhm.
like, oh, I didn't realize I had that bias, or I didn't realize you did, or whatever.
Yeah. And also that I think that sometimes we don't want to talk about this because you don't want to acknowledge the fact that your kids are going to get older and one day they are going to
I
go and do this.
know they
Isn't
are.
that?
They really are. It's kind of wild.
Mhm. And I
I
mean,
know.
it's like I think about it as like that's a whole separate thing, right? Like
Mhm.
you grow up and you have good habits and healthy habits for yourself and boundaries and safety and all of those pieces. But like I don't want to be the one that holds you back from going and doing that
Mhm.
because I'm afraid to have that conversation or I think if I have that conversation that it's like the DARE program, right? It's like if we tell kids don't do any drugs, then kids are just not going to do drugs. It's like,
Yes.
the church tells you not to have sex, so you don't have sex. I'm like
Yeah.
survey says it
Survey
is
says no.
unsuccessful.
That is not true. If the idea that like, well, if I just don't bring it up, then they're not gonna want to do it. Like if I bring it up, then that's gonna introduce the idea to them, and then they're gonna want to do it. It's like A, it's gonna come up anyway, and B, that's just not
Yeah.
correct. We should, I feel like in a year or two, we should have this conversation again and see how it
Mm,
changed. Like when our kids are like a year or two older,
yes.
I feel like who knows what we'll say about the whole
Hmm.
thing. Probably something different.
Yeah. I mean, because the whole conversation evolves too. It's not, what
Totally.
you're talking to your daughter about now is not going to be what they're interested in a year or two, definitely, or
No.
what they know or the context around their friends.
Right. 100%. And the media, all the
Mm.
media, the social medias and the phones and the video games and the whatnots. Did that make me sound old?
It doesn't make you sound old when you say the in front of it, right? Like the
I
internet.
total the internets. Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, I am so excited. We should revisit this. I'm game
Hmm.
to see how it changes, but I'm
I feel like
really
this is
excited that you
fascinating.
came back. Mhm.
Thank you for having me back. This has been an
Yes.
absolute delight.
Yes, and here's hoping that people that are listening today take it as an opportunity to like maybe kick the pebble into the field and say, "All right, I'm ready to like dip my toe in this. I'm ready to not necessarily know all the answers, like you said, knowing that you're going to say the wrong thing or you're going to be like, oh, I'd actually like to edit that statement, and that there's a lot of value that kids are going to get from that because like
you get to change your
survey
mind.
says, yeah.
Yeah.
In so many things that you learn in parenting or that you learn in parenting now that we're not in the 90s anymore is that because you say something doesn't mean that that has to be written in stone, right? You're allowed to evolve and you're allowed to say, ooh,
That's like
I don't really like.
Consent 101. Yeah. Consent 101, you can take it back.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Please also check the show notes. Talkmore.org. That is where I would start. They have phenomenal resources. It's made by a Masters of Public Health. We'll put the link in the show notes. They have like guides for every age. They have book recommendations. They have everything. Start there. There's a great Planned Parenthood link too that we'll share. And if you're looking for exploring your own relationship with yourself or your sex, or most frequently I hear a lot of moms saying, I really don't care if I ever have sex again, but I do it because I feel guilty. Call me. Let's talk.
Yes.
We can make that better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fill out a form, send an email, request more information, all of the above, because that's not a feeling that you should, that you need to live
that's
with.
no fun. We don't have to do that.
No.
Yeah.
No, not anymore. It's 2025.
Not today. Nope. Amen.
Well, thank you for coming. And yes, again, everyone check the show notes, and I'm sure I will talk to you soon. You got to come back.
Sounds amazing.
It's too fun. All right.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.